Hello, everybody. Happy May and welcome to Tour Tuesday. It is good to see you all. I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy to be here. We've got a great crowd today, and I've got two very important people that are going to be presenting three very wonderful tours to you. And we have a lot to talk about. So I'm gonna get right to it because I don't want to keep you too long. And I will introduce our first guest today. So before I do that, let me just recap. We're talking about Hudson Valley, New York highlights. So the Hudson Valley of New York, which is a beautiful part of New York. We're talking about its highlights today. And then we're talking about Mississippi. We're going to Biloxi, Mississippi, and a few spots along the way. We call this tour the Moxie of Biloxi. And then we'll be talking about a tour called Blennerhassett Island in West Virginia. I bet lots of you never heard of Blennerhassett Island. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And to talk about our first tour, Hudson Valley, I have brought in one of our partners called Hudson Valley from Hudson River Valley Tours, and his name is Steve Adams, and we're happy to have him. Steve's company, we've worked with Steve's company for a very long time, and Steve is what we call an expert in what he does. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve, and what you do?
Okay, hello everyone. As Sandy mentioned, I'm Steve Adams. Hudson River Valley Tours, as Sandy mentioned, his Star has worked with them for many years. I just bought the company back in November of 2019, right before the pandemic. So buying a tourism company on the eve of a global pandemic, been one of those things. It's been a wild ride, but it's coming out now, and things are going very well. I'm very happy, and it's great that I get to meet and work with people like Sandy and invite people to the Hudson River Valley. And I'm really looking forward to your group coming here this September. I think, whenever I design an itinerary for the Hudson River Valley, I always feel like I'm kind of choosing among my children because I love so many parts of it so much. And I want to share all of them with the people who visit, and it's an easy thing to overstuff a program. So hopefully I've hit the sweet spot with this program that we'll be working with, and give folks a lot of highlights and very full days without being a little too much. There was one tour, my first tour that I had with a group from Maine in July when it was hot. They were there for 5 days, and the last day they just mutinied on me. They just couldn't. They just said, no, we just want to go back. There was too much, So I learned my lesson with that, and I think we've got a good tour, a nice pace, and with a lot of fun stuff coming up.
Awesome. That's great. And just to clarify, I know you know this on paper, but our tour is in July.
Oh, July. I'm sorry. Right. Yes.
All good. I know you know that, but it's a little different when you got the camera looking at you and 50 faces. So our tour is July 19th through 23rd through 21st, like I said, 3 days
Right.
and 2 nights. And you'll see just wonderful scenery. You'll hear history. You'll see mansions and museums. And of course, the highlight of this trip is West Point. So we're looking at that picture, which is Walkway over the Hudson, another spot that we're going to see. So there's 6 meals included in this tour, 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, and 2 dinners. And I am going to let Steve take it away from here because he's going to talk all about this trip.
Okay, so the group will come first to Newburgh. So let me say the Hudson River extends pretty much straight north from New York City. So you'd be driving up along past New York City and straight north there. Newburgh is about 60 miles north of, New York City is pretty long, pretty big. So depending on where you measure from, could be 50 miles north of the city. It's on the west side. We'll be coming to the waterfront at Newburgh and having lunch at the River Grill restaurant there, which is one of several restaurants that's right there on the waterfront. They do a very nice job with their lunches. And following that, then we'll just head down the street just a little ways, also on the waterfront, to board the Pride of the Hudson, which is a river cruise boat that will take us on a 2-hour cruise. Now, the Hudson River cuts right through the Appalachian Mountains, or rather, I should say maybe that's where the Appalachian Mountains cut through. Those are called the Hudson Highlands. And Newburgh is just to the north of the Hudson Highlands. And so the river cruise will take us down into the mountainous region. And that's, you can see on the slide here, the Breakneck Mountain, also, well, on another mountain there is called Storm King. These are like the gates of the Appalachians as we go south. Before we get there, though, in Beacon itself, we'll see Washington's headquarters, which was the first state park in the United States that was created back in the 1800s. That was recognized. This was, in this area, the Revolutionary Army encamped during the Revolutionary War. And this house overlooking the Hudson River is where George Washington had his headquarters for several winter encampments there. Opposite, as we're having lunch, in fact, you can look out the window, look across the river, and see Mount Beacon, which was, there's a riverfront community there, the city of Beacon, and just behind that is Mount Beacon. It's called that because the Appalachian Mountains, they formed a fortress wall for George Washington's army during the Revolutionary War. And there were outposts on the top of these peaks. And should the British try to come north through the mountains, the idea was that the outposts there would light fires, that there would be a beacon lit on top of that mountain. And that's where that mountain got its name, as Mount Beacon. And as you go down through south, you'll see other mountains. Breakneck Mountain, the village of Cold Spring will be on the left. And eventually, when you get down, when the Hudson River goes through the Appalachian Mountains, it's not a straight shot. It's a curvy place, which is why West Point was put where it was as a fortification, because sailing ships would have a tough time negotiating the curves in the river and the currents and the winds that they'd have to slow down. And so it'd be a good opportunity to place fortresses and cannons there to prevent the British from sailing up the Hudson. And this place where West Point is sort of a whirlpool-y kind of place in the river. It's called World's End. It was very tricky navigation for sailing vessels of the day. And there are a lot of sunk ships at the bottom of that. We'll sail right down to World's End, where you can get a look at Constitution Island opposite from West Point, and see World's End. Also, at that part of the river is where there was a chain, a cast iron chain that was put across the river from West Point over to Constitution Island, again to prevent British sailing ships from proceeding up. So that'll be, about an hour there, about an hour back of beautiful scenery. Take us to about 4:30 or so, and then we'll head on up to Kingston to check into the hotel that we're staying at, the Best Western Plus in Kingston. It's a very nice hotel. It's the best value in the Hudson Valley. It hits that sweet spot of very comfortable accommodations, has a very nice restaurant. We'll be having dinner that night, so we don't have to go anywhere. And there's a swimming pool, and it's just a great place to relax after the day's trip and the river cruise. And I'm really happy that we're doing the river cruise. I love when groups come to the Hudson River because it is so, what's the word I'm looking for? The Hudson River is just, it's just such a part of everywhere where we're going to be. We're always close to the river. We're crossing over the river. We're visiting places with views of the river. And it's just the constant backdrop to what we're doing, in addition to being beautiful itself. And I love it when groups come and we can take a river cruise and I can introduce them to the river right off the bat, because it's going to be a part of everything we do for the entire stay.
Love it.
Yeah. All right. And then the next day, there'll be a hot breakfast at the hotel. And we'll have a step-on guide this day, meet the group at the hotel. And we'll travel a short distance to outside of Hudson, New York, a little bit to the north. Again, we'll cross over a bridge and we'll visit the home of the Hudson River School painter, Frederick Edwin Church, who was a very successful painter in this, what was called the Hudson River School of Painting. It's kind of funny. That was one of those names that somebody said that a reviewer meant as an insult, kind of sniffy, because American art in the 1800s hadn't reached the level that they thought of the academic art of England or the continent. And so this sniffy reviewer said, the Hudson River School. But it was really about capturing nature in an undeveloped state, in its natural state. Because even 200 years ago, so much of Europe, there wasn't much wilderness left in the Europe or in the England that people, were used to. And so here was this wilderness continent that hadn't yet been industrialized, And the Hudson River School painters during this romantic era of European history were capturing that wildness that appealed so much that you didn't really find in European art at the time. The first artist was a fellow named Thomas Cole, who was English by birth, but who came over, and his student, Frederick Church, who was the next generation, who was really popular in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, made a fabulous living by painting. They would paint these enormous landscapes and then display them at museums and charge people 25 cents to come in and watch it. And these programs were so successful that he was able to afford a nice life. He created a landscape outside of Hudson. This property is called Olana, and it was an entire landscape architecture undertaking with the landscape architect Calvert Vaux, who was involved with the planning of so many places that we're familiar with, like Central Park in New York State, for instance, in New York City, for instance. And so what you're seeing here, the picture of this house, Frederick Church had been to the Middle East and was so impressed with many of the motifs that he had seen there that he came back and designed his house to reflect them. But you'll also see the landscape. It's about much more than just the house. You know, it's the whole landscape architecture that he and Calvert Vaux developed together. It just makes for a terrific tour. So that'll be the morning of day 2. Then we can
Quick
go on
question, Steve. Do we get to go upstairs in Olana or just the first floor?
I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. I believe it's the full house tour that we do go upstairs with that.
Great.
Yes. So, and then on that day after we leave Olana, we'll go down to the village of Rhinebeck, where we can have lunch. There's about 20 restaurants there that are available. You can pretty much get whatever you want. Everything is within about 2-minute walk of the central of the stoplight in Rhinebeck. It's a small place, but with a lot of character and a lot of different places to have lunch. There's some different shopping opportunities there with a lot of neat shops as well. And following lunch, we will go to the Springwood, which is the house, the boyhood home of Franklin Roosevelt. There's a visitor center there, of course, and then we can go over and tour the house, learn about Franklin's boyhood, his growing up, what that was all about, what life was like for him. And there's also the Presidential Library and Museum there on the grounds. That would be a self-guided portion, and that's just as you can see. I mean, that has a little bit of everything. That has, you know, the top picture here, that blue car. That's a car that had hand controls made especially for Franklin Roosevelt because he didn't have the use of his legs anymore to drive. So he had that convertible fitted with hand controls and would drive all around his property. He was very proud of. He was a tree farmer. That was when he applied for his government job as president. It said, "What is your occupation?" He said, "Tree farmer." He had a large estate and planted tens of thousands of trees on that, and would use that car to drive around or to take people around, guests around when they visited, like for instance the King and Queen of England when they came to visit in 1939. And he loved to drive around on his property and go a little bit crazy and try to lose the Secret Service detail that was trailing him. And so he was a pretty wild driver. And at one point, Queen Elizabeth, when they were visiting in the summer of 1939, said she was fine. You know, she didn't care if she never took another ride with Franklin Roosevelt. But that second picture down there, that shows the library at Springwood. That's a beautiful room. That's where Franklin and his family and friends would await the election results that came in for his president, the 4 times that he was elected president. That third picture down there is an outside picture of Springwood. And it makes for a terrific afternoon to go there. When you go to the Presidential Library and Museum, they have, you learn about Franklin and his house. And then when you go to the museum, you can learn all about his private life, but also his time as president, becoming president during the Depression, and then leading the country through the Second World War. After that, we will head over to the walkway over the Hudson, let folks get a breath of fresh air there, stretch their legs. This is a converted railroad bridge. This is a railroad bridge that was built back in the 1880s, and it was falling apart. And there was this is a terrific example of what individual people can do, and then citizen groups can do to rescue landmarks and places. This bridge, it was in disuse. There was a fire there. There were pieces of metal falling down onto the roadway below, and it was going to be dismantled when a particular individual in the Poughkeepsie community intervened and got very busy. He was one of these kind of people who loves humanity in theory but can't stand anybody in particular. So he was great for getting the ball rolling, but not really good for getting a community thing going. But then there was a community group that formed around him that managed to bring this project to fruition, where that railroad bridge, which is 212 feet above the surface of the Hudson River, and converted it to this, what you see here. It's a wide walkway, cement walkway with guardrails on the side. I mean, there are some folks who even still, it's obviously a very safe, calm place to be. It can be a little bit windy, but it feels very safe there. But some folks find it a little bit daunting to go out. But it's a great place to go out and experience the river and see. This is north of the Appalachian Mountains again. And this is the longest stretch of the river. In fact, the Intercollegiate Rowing Association, the IRA, for about 50 years held their rowing championships here. There's a 4-mile stretch of straight river, and they would row, down the Hudson River here. There are railroad tracks on the left that are used by freight trains. And at that time, they would put grandstands on the back of flat cars, and they would ride down the river so that people could watch the race as it progressed over the 4-mile distance that it went. And there are placards out talking about the environment and the nature. It's a really great place. Very cool.
Sounds cool.
Following that, we'll head back to Hyde Park and have dinner at the Culinary Institute of America, the premier cooking school here in the United States. There are 3 restaurants there. I believe we'll be eating at American Bounty, and they just do a terrific job. It's a great experience for a dinner. Then we'll head back to the hotel afterwards.
Great.
On the 3rd day, we'll check out of the hotel and head down to West Point, which is about an hour away from Kingston, from the hotel that we're at. There is a wonderful redone visitor center there. When you walk in, you've got a spectacular picture window view of the Hudson River and the Hudson Highlands. From there, the bathrooms are there. And they've also got a wonderful exhibit that I really encourage people to take advantage of. It's called the Cadet Experience. And you walk through, and it describes the 4-year cadet experience. What do cadets go through? Like, it shows you what their room looks like. It just gives you, it talks about the team building exercises that they do, the academic programs that they do, and how West Point converts them from 18-year-old high school kids into young officers for the United States military. It's a terrific introduction to the tour that the group will take. So I leave a little bit of time there. We have about 45 minutes when we get there. And then, excuse me, and then a guide from West Point Tours will join our bus, and we go onto the campus and go to the Cadet Chapel, which you see a picture of there, and also to the parade ground, which is, you can see in the bottom right there, and just talk about life at West Point, what the cadets experience, the history of the institution. And we also go to the point where you can look out and see the sense of the fortifications and why West Point was put where it was, the military history, the Civil War aspects of it, and how so many of the cadets at the outbreak of the Civil War were from the South and went to fight for the Confederacy, and that there were people who knew each other. The generals in charge of the armies in the Civil War, they all knew each other. They were friends. They had been classmates at West Point together. It's very, very unusual that there were, I think there was maybe one major battle in the time of the Civil War where there was no West Point general commanding either one side or the other. It was more typical that there would be West Pointers on both sides of it. And that's a very poignant, very poignant part of the story that we get there. And I guess that's really the key word for me, is story. When I came to the Hudson River Valley about 15 years ago for the first time and just fell in love with the region, I just love the natural world that you find there. It's just so beautiful. I love the river. I just see so many ghosts walking around, so many prominent people. There's so many great stories there. So many, I call it, so many things that are brought out that, we have craft brewing and craft this and craft that. And the Hudson Valley really lends itself to craft living. People who go there and create a world around them that reflects who they are and it's just a spectacular, wonderful place. And I can't do it justice in 3 days. Sandy and I have done the best we could with this tour. And another thing here, I've almost forgotten that it was also a wine growing region, or it is a wine growing region, one of the viticultural regions in New York State. And so following lunch at the West Point Hotel, the Thayer Hotel, named after the first prominent superintendent there, we will go to Brotherhood Winery, which is the America's oldest winery in continuous operation. During the Depression, they had permission to make sacramental wine. So they are able to retain that string of being a winery in constant operation all through Prohibition those days. And they have a wonderful tour, wonderful cellars, and it's a great tasting. And then you'll be on your way back home.
That is a lot in 3 days. That is like, I remember when we were planning this tour, I'm like, are you sure we can fit it all in? And the answer is yes, we can fit it all in. So you have lots of wonderful attractions and meals and experiences to look forward to on this trip. So I have a couple questions for you, Steve, before you go, that people asked in the chat room. Do you know how much walking is on this tour overall?
On the first day, very little, just basically from the bus to the restaurant, and then from the bus to the boat, and then back to the boat, and then from the bus to the hotel. And then we're having dinner at the hotel. For those who want, the hotel, the Best Western Plus in Kingston, is very close to the historic Stockade District of Kingston. So for those who want to walk more after dinner, being in July, as Sandy reminded me, we're going to have that long evening to work with, and the historic district of Kingston is just about a 10-minute walk away. So that would be an option too. On the second day, Olana is a bit of walking, not a lot. I talked about the landscape there, but we really just walk from the visitor center, walk up the driveway to the house. That's a couple of 100 yards. And then the tour of the house. And then, like I said, Rhinebeck is not very much. Like I said, all the restaurants are within a 2-minute walk of the center of the village. At FDR's home, the visitor center is about 400 meters, about a quarter of a mile from the house. But the National Park Service, there is a tram that you can take that they will drive you over to the house and drive you back if you want that. So again, there is a walking portion, but for those who would rather take the tram, that's available. The walkway over the Hudson, it is what it is. It's about probably, the part that's over the river is only about a half mile wide at that point. The walkway extends much further onto both ends because they had to get back to the land hills that it was built around. So when you see that it's 1.25 miles long, it's not the actual part over the river. So if you were to walk out to the middle of the bridge and then walk back, that's about a 1/4 mile each way. That would be about a half mile total. For those who want to, though obviously you don't have to. There'll be your step-on guide with you who can be talking with you, so it's not necessary to walk out there. And then the CIA is nothing. And then the West Point tour is very limited, and it's walking a little bit. Again, you go into the student chapel. We'll walk at the parade field. We sit on bleachers and have a talk, and then we walk over. It's maybe another 100 yards over to the memorial and to Promontory Point. So there is some, but it's nothing. There's not a lot. And then Brotherhood is really just from the parking lot to the winery, and then a little bit in the cellars. So there is a little bit, but not a lot.
And do you know if at the West Point, during the West Point tour, do we stop at the cemetery at West Point?
No, that's not a part of this.
Okay, good. Good questions in chat. Does anybody have any additional questions for Steve while he's here? This is your chance. You've got the expert. It sounds fantastic.
Well, and you'll have an expert on the bus with you on day 2 as well. The guide that I have with you is super.
Awesome.
Won't be me, but he's better than me.
Just to recap, this tour is July 19th through 21st. Andrea Kimmelheim is the tour director, and there's 29 people booked already. So get to work if you want to go. There's only 25 seats left. One more quick question. How close is Bannerman?
we'll go right past Bannerman. That's it's pretty close to Beacon, and it's we'll be sailing right past it, so you get a good view of the castle.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your partnership. Thank you for planning such a wonderful tour for us. And we will see you in July.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Sandy. All right, take
right.
care, everybody.
Take care, Steve.
Bye-bye.
All right. I am moving on. I would like to welcome back a familiar face. For those of you that have been on a Tour Tuesdays before, you may recognize this gentleman. His name is Bob Klein, and he is the owner of US Tours. He has a wonderful tour company that we often partner with him, and he plans these wonderful trips for us. So yes, we do plan a lot of our trips. Yes, we do. But in some cases, we're not experts in all areas, which is why we use Steve and Hudson Valley. And we're using Bob and his team for our Moxie of Biloxi trip in Mississippi. So I'm going to reintroduce Bob to you. Bob, if you want to say hello to everybody and sort of just remind everybody who you are.
Good evening, folks. How are you? I'm a tour company. I'm a tour operator. We're creative. We do unique and different things. And we do appreciate your business and your patronage. So thank you, Sandy, and thanks to all of your customers.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate all you do for us. And let's see, I'll throw out a few tours that Bob's team has put together. How about our Blue Christmas? Maybe some of you have gone with us to Blue Christmas. We had a Johnny Cash prison concert trip. We had a JFK birthday trip. Bob's team puts together these really unique itineraries, and we love them. And we are thankful for him and his team for working so hard to put together these events. So first of all, let me give you an overview of this trip. It's in October 21st through 28th. So you won't have the heat of Mississippi during the summer. It's an 8-day trip, and it's priced at $1,800 per person based on 2 people in a room. There are 7 meals plus 3 food credits. And those food credits come at the casino hotel. So you do get a lot for your money on this trip, as you'll see when we're going through the itinerary. So on our first day, we've got to travel, right? So we're going to head down to Fayetteville, North Carolina, where we're going to spend the night at the Country Inn and Suites, a lovely property that's right off of the highway. And then we'll wake up the next morning and we'll head down to Atlanta, and we'll stay at a Drury Inn. For those of you that have experienced Drury Inns, I know you love them as much as we do. Why do we love Drury Inns? Well, in addition to them being so comfortable and friendly, they provide a kickback each evening at 5:30 p.m. where they actually provide free food and beverages. I know it's unheard of, but they actually provide beer and wine and free food. So some of you will make a dinner out of it. And some of you will just use it for appetizers and head out on your own for dinner. So this is a very wonderful property that we've stayed at year after year, and we do love the Drury Inn. On day 3, we head to Warm Springs, Georgia, and Bob, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, you just saw where FDR was born and raised, and Warm Springs is where he passed away while still in office. So Warm Springs is a historic site. It's a look into the life of FDR. And it's something everyone should see. Then the next slide here, you're heading into Biloxi. The IP Hotel is the old Imperial Palace. I think what they did was they built a new tower on it some years ago, and they decided they wanted to put up a sign, but Imperial Palace was too long to go across the tower, so they just changed the name to IP. So
I
anyway,
100% agree with you.
the IP fits just great. Look at that. Now, part of what we like to do you're staying in a casino hotel, and most people think of Biloxi as a casino community, but every town has history. Every town has things that you need to learn, or you get to learn when you go there. And I have here a book that I just read recently, written in 2022 by John Grisham, The Boys of Biloxi. I encourage you to read that. And the history of Biloxi, if I can take just a moment to read one paragraph.
Please do. This is great. I didn't know. This is great. I love it. I never heard of that book.
100 years ago, Biloxi was a bustling resort and fishing community on the Gulf Coast. Some of its 12,000 people worked in shipbuilding, some in the hotels and restaurants. But for the majority, their livelihoods came from the ocean and its bountiful supply of seafood. The workers were immigrants from Eastern Europe, most from Croatia, where their ancestors had fished for centuries in the Adriatic Sea. The men worked the schooners and trawlers, harvesting seafood in the Gulf, while the women and children shucked oysters and packed shrimp for 10 cents an hour. There were 40 canneries side by side in an area known as the Back Bay. In 1925, Biloxi shipped 20 million tons of seafood to the rest of the country. Demand was so great and the supply so plentiful that by then the city could boast of being the seafood capital of the world. And that's part of what you're going to see when you get into Biloxi. We're not just gambling. Anybody can go into a casino and just gamble, but you're buying an 8-day trip to learn some things and to get a feel for the community. And the very first thing you're going to do on the second day is go fishing. You're on a shrimp boat. If you'll change the slide now.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Just about to catch up with you.
So we're going out, we're going to catch shrimp and whatever else falls into the net. And then we're going to bring it back and we're going to cook it. We're going to have a shrimp boil on the pier. We're going to add peppers, sausage, corn. It's just kind of a unique experience. During this day, you'll also learn many of the other things about Biloxi. Well, here we are with seafood still. Seafood was big. The Marine and Seafood Museum is just filled with all kinds of things that you would have no idea really existed. So spend some time with those exhibits and learn how this is done. It's cool stuff. You'll see here in that one picture, that's the Biloxi Lighthouse. You'll see that on the tour. You're going to see memorials to hurricanes Katrina and Camille. And you're going to pick up a lot of the community history as you come up and down the road on a trolley tour. And dinner that day is at McElroy's Harbor. There's something on this day that we didn't mention. Yes, indeed. Part of your tour, we're gone to Beauvoir. Beauvoir is a big historic house. The guy who built it in 1840 something first created 62 8-foot tall brick pillars. And then he put the house on top of those 8-foot tall pillars. So he had air conditioning. The ocean breeze blew under the house all day long, all evening long. And after the Civil War, 5 to 10 years after the Civil War, he sold it to Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. So this is Mississippi's Mount Vernon. This is their history. This is one of their legends. And you're going to get to see that home as well.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry we left that off the slide. So good point. And Beauvoir is a great attraction. Absolutely. Super important to this area.
I could spend 20, 30 minutes telling all about Beauvoir, but we're going to let those guides and those docents do it when you get there. Your next day, Mardi Gras. You're going to go to the Coastal Mardi Gras Museum. People in the South just know how to party. They put on parades, they dress up, and it's fun. You're going to learn a lot here. And then you're going to have lunch at a very famous place, Mary Mahoney's. Ronald Reagan, George Bush, George W. Bush, several other presidents have eaten here. John Grisham eats there anytime he's in town. He's written 3 books about Biloxi. All of his characters in the books go into Mary Mahoney's and eat. So this is a well-known restaurant, and I'm sure you'll have a good time there. Next. All right, now we're visiting other sites in town. Walter Anderson Museum of Art, and this is cool. This is WAMA, Walter Anderson Museum of Art, WAMA. It's a family museum. The description is pretty adequate here, and enjoy it. Look at the picture off to the left, the murals, the style of art. It's unique. Next. Okay, and then leaving town, we're heading back towards New Jersey. You're going to go through Alabama. Bellingrath Gardens is a beautiful home, 65-acre garden, and it was owned by a man who was the largest distributor of Coca-Cola in Alabama back in the day. So he made a lot of money, and he built a garden that was better with Coke. So, and then you're back to Atlanta and the Drury Inn, relax at the 5:30 kickback. And since this was a seafood tour in the morning, we're going through the Georgia Aquarium, just see how big some of those fishes get, and back up to Fayetteville and overnight, and then you're home tomorrow.
I love it. That's a great trip. And I love the storytelling that goes along with it. Absolutely. Lots of seafood, right?
Yeah.
We had a suggestion that you could read the book on the ride down to Biloxi. You're absolutely right, Mitra. That's a great idea.
And there is some of the heritage of Biloxi in that book. One, there were 2 boys, the boys from Biloxi. They were friends. They played softball together. One's dad owned illegal casinos. The other dad was the DA. So as they grew up, one went the casino route, the other went the law route. So it's a John Grisham book, but still it's painted on the town of Biloxi.
Very cool. Very cool. Does anybody have any questions for Bob about this wonderful trip that we're offering? This is a trip we only offer Biloxi pretty much every other year at this point. So if you want to see it, you want to jump on it this October for sure. Howard Cylinder is the tour director, and we have 8 people booked so far. So we would love for you to join us on this trip. It's a wonderful adventure. And our tour director, Howard, will make it very interesting for you. It takes a bit to get there, but we'll stop every 2 to 3 hours, and we provide a little entertainment and content and rest and relaxation. So the time goes by pretty quickly on that trip. All right, Bob, they listened well and you did a great job. So there's no questions at this point. So we are going to move right on to Blennerhassett Island. This trip is a summertime trip, August 10th through 13th. It's 4 days and 3 nights. It's $1,300 per person based on 2 people in a room. And it includes 7 meals, 3 breakfasts, 1 lunch, and 3 dinners. So I will let Bob take it away from here.
Sandy, if you would, go back 1 slide for a minute.
You got it.
This is Blennerhassett Island. You can only see the Ohio River on the left side, but there's also a river on the right side. Back in the day, everything on the left, including the island, was Virginia. Everything on the right was the Northwest Territory. It was not Ohio yet. This area was settled by Revolutionary War veterans who received land in the Northwest Territory in lieu of wages that the government couldn't pay them. So they moved out here and they built Marietta and a few other communities along the route. And then 5 or 10 years later, Harmon Blennerhassett shows up. Harmon's a character. He was a wealthy Irishman. He did 2 things that kind of got him in trouble back at home. He was involved in things with the Irish Republican Army. His politics were questionable. And then he married his niece. So for both reasons, nobody bought him dinner anymore. He wasn't invited to parties. So Harmon and the wife leave. They sail across to Philadelphia, get a couple of wagons, and drive over to Pittsburgh and hop on a flatboat. Unlike most pioneers, though, Harmon brought cash. Harmon was a wealthy man, and you just don't leave that in the bank in Ireland. He brought all his cash with him. So now he's floating down the river on the frontier. The guys from Marietta were fighting Indians 5 years ago, and Harmon's in this wilderness, and he and Margaret see this island, and they fell in love with it. They built this mansion. Everybody else is living in log cabins or inside forts. So Harmon builds this great big whitewashed mansion in the middle of nowhere. The dependency on the left is the kitchen, on the right's Harmon's office, and they lived in the middle. They built it with these little porticos connecting the kitchen especially, so that should there be a fire in the kitchen, it wouldn't hit the house. So that's the way they built that. So
Makes good sense.
And in this state of bliss so happy, they lived contentedly for many moons until Aaron Burr shows up. Aaron Burr had been vice president, almost president. He lost to Thomas Jefferson on the 36th electoral ballot count. 35 times they tied for presidency. So Aaron serves as Jefferson's vice president, and he doesn't like it. He's not doing very much. Aaron's imagining, dreaming. Aaron knows everybody in Washington. He knows everything in America. He's been around, you know. So he gets in a duel with Alexander Hamilton, who is incredibly important in American history, and kills Hamilton. And now Aaron's disgraced. And he takes a wagon over to Pittsburgh and hops on a flatboat. And he's coming down the river, only he doesn't see Blennerhassett Island just as wilderness. He sees this mansion. He's been passing log cabin after log cabin, and lo and behold, there's a mansion sitting there. So Aaron gets off and introduces himself. And he finds out that somewhere in the mansion or in the basement, there's buckets full of cash. And Aaron's got ambitions. Aaron knows that we've acquired Louisiana, but just west of Louisiana is brand new territory, Texas. Aaron thinks maybe with enough funding, with enough cash, he can set up Texas as his own country. And Blennerhassett's got the money in the basement. So they begin buying arms, and they've got troops encamped on the island, and they're getting ready for this. When, lo and behold, Jefferson hears about it. So just up the river 10 miles is a place called Henderson Hall, and Alexander Henderson founded the Marine Corps. And he's retired out here now. And Tom sends him a letter and says, Alexander, go get those boys and arrest them. So the Marines, the militia go over, they pick up Aaron Burr and Harmon Blennerhassett, arrest them, take them to Richmond, Virginia. The story's almost over, but it's just a fascinating story.
It is.
In Richmond, they're on trial for treason. The presiding judge is none other than John Marshall, the most famous Supreme Court justice in American history. And during the trial, Jefferson says, I want you to lock them up, throw the key away, hang them for all I care, they're guilty. And Marshall says, well, you have to prove that. And Jefferson says, no, I don't. I'm the president of the United States. And Marshall says, that's not the same as being a king or a dictator. In America, you have to prove your evidence. This, sir, is what we call a subpoena. And Marshall hit Jefferson with a subpoena. The second time a sitting president was hit with a subpoena in a criminal case, are you ready? Richard Nixon had to turn over the Watergate tapes, all because of events on Blennerhassett Island. So,
Wow.
this trip is going to drive over. You're going to stay at the Blennerhassett Hotel. It's a lovely place. Food is marvelous. It's the best food in town. I eat there once or twice a week. The rooms are very nice. When built, this place had twice as many rooms. When it was remodeled, they turned every 2 rooms into 1. There's some funkiness here and there with unlevel floors between rooms, but it's a 100-year-old hotel, 150-year-old hotel. you're going to enjoy staying here. And you're going to be here for 3 nights. You'll get off the road that night and have dinner. Then in the morning, you're heading up to Marietta. And this is the land of the Revolutionary Pioneers. So you're going to see things that date back to the 1790s. You're going to visit the Campus Martius Museum of the Northwest. You know what Campus Martius stands for? It's named after a place in Rome, the Field of Mars in Latin. And in Rome, there was this great big field that troops trained, and the fort was. It was the Campus Martius. Then you're also going to tour the castle. The castle is a little bit older, or a little bit younger, excuse me. It's from, well, I don't know exactly. Show us a picture of the castle. Maybe you wrote it in there, Sandy. That's your next slide.
Hold on, let's see. Oh, there we go.
There it is. Yeah. 1855. Okay.
I was just testing you, Bob.
Thank you. Well, see, I don't remember everything. I got so lost in my story about Richard Nixon. So, and throughout the day, you're going to visit some unique shops and things that are just quaint. Mulberry Lane Country Store. My goodness, Carol, my partner, she spends an hour and a half, 2 hours in that store every time she's in town. It's long. It's filled with stuff that a man doesn't want. But then you get to go to Hall's Chocolate, and that's filled with things that a man does want. So a little bit of something for everybody on this. Your dinner is at Da Vinci's Italian restaurant in Williamstown. Interestingly enough, I opened Da Vinci's 40 some years ago, maybe 50 years ago. It was a Sunoco gas station. Now they must seat 500 people inside.
Oh my God. I'm learning all of this new information about you, Bob.
I'm just, you've been in travel long enough, you're just filled with all kinds of trivial stuff.
Yeah. And now all of the star travelers know all about you.
Yeah. And then ending the day, you're going to come back to the Blennerhassett Hotel and you're going to meet Margaret. And she's going to tell you about life on the island, life with Harmon, and what happened afterwards, after the trial. So you'll learn a little bit about their story. 20, 30 years ago, they did an outdoor drama on the island called Eden on the River. And the docents and the local people that support the island keep telling you that this was Harmon and Margaret's Eden. It was their garden. And they were eventually thrown out of it. Lastly, the next day, you're going to visit the Blennerhassett Museum. You'll have a little video, then 30, 40 minutes to go through the museum. You'll walk 100 yards down to the river, hop on this little boat, and off we go to the island. It's about 20 minutes across the river. Box lunch is included. And then after the island, oh, I should mention, on the island, you're going to go through the mansion. There's also a wagon ride, a horse-drawn wagon ride around the property. There's another home that the historical people bought and moved over to the island several years ago. So there's a second historic home. And the grave sites for Harmon and Margaret are both behind the portico on the right. These local docents just figured since they had so much fun here, they'd go find the Blennerhassetts and bring them back. And they did. Wow. Harmon was in Mississippi, Margaret in New York City. And now they're together again in the garden out back. Ending that day, we've got a local historic theater that's been renovated, and you're going to have dessert on the stage. They'll talk about the theater a little bit, and you'll end the day. And that's cool. Pretty much the tour.
Yeah, you can't get dessert on the stage of a theater when you just visit it on your own. You got to go with Star Tours.
Can you imagine doing that in Manhattan?
I mean, I always say, like, when you travel with Star, you definitely get to do experiences that you would not be able to discover on your own. So that's a really cool thing. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
So this tour, as I said, is August 10th through 13th. Your tour director is Angie Belmont. There are already 30 people booked on this trip with 20 seats available. So I imagine this tour will sell out, so don't delay. Does anybody have any questions for Bob about Blennerhassett Island, or rewind a little bit? I'm sure he can still talk about Biloxi. Any questions before he leaves us? So are you going to join us for dinner on that trip?
It's local. I like the Blennerhassett, so yes.
All right, so you guys may see Bob in person, which will be, you could be an attraction yourself as part of this trip. Just don't charge us for it.
Amazon's got lots of copies of Boys of Biloxi.
Good to know. Good to know.
Recommended.
You probably can get it pretty well priced on Amazon. Good. Thank you, Bob, so much for that. I really appreciate it. Let's see. I would like to remind you, there are 2 lovely ladies waiting to make your reservations, Deb and Lindy, who are also on this call today. And you can call them and make your reservation, or you can always book online 24/7. Oh, let's see. Before I pick a gift card winner, I just want to say thank you so much to Bob Klein for joining us. I know you have to run. Everybody wave goodbye to Bob. Thank you. Really appreciate all your knowledge and your storytelling, and the accent, his fake accent. No, I'm just kidding. It's his real accent. He really does live in West Virginia. I did not realize how close he lived to Blennerhassett. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So let's see. Let me go back and share my screen. All right. Oh, I'm going to make you guys wait 1 second. So before we announce our winner, we want you to keep up with STAR. Join us for our next tour Tuesday on June 6th. Tuesday, June 6th. We'll be talking about Gloucester and Salem, the Whale Watch tour, our Washington, D.C. tour, which is new. It's called Monuments and Memorials. And then we have the National Capital Region, Land of the Free, where we stay at the Gaylord Hotel. Jean Gray will be presenting with me on June 6th. I also welcome you to join our Facebook groups. We have a Facebook group especially for solo travelers, people that often come by themselves. And you're never by yourself when you're on a STAR tour. And we invite you to join the STAR Cross Country Travelers Facebook group, where you can meet up with past and future cross-country travelers and hear compelling content and information regarding our cross-country departures. Follow us on Instagram if you haven't already followed us. And be sure to watch out for those email blasts every Tuesday and Friday, and your vacation catalogs. Your next vacation catalog is coming right after June 1st. So without delay, I will tell you that our $25 gift card winner is Helena Amendolia. Is Helena still on the call? Let's see. Helena, you can, if you're still on the call, say hello.
Hi.
Oh, there she is.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch with you tomorrow and remind you that you have $25 to spend on any trip, whether it's the trip to a trip from tonight or any trip. So enjoy.
Thank you.
And I see some STAR staff that I want to say hello to. Deborah and Lindy from the office. Hello. And I see some tour directors, Andrea Kimmelheim, Evie Simon. Let's see, Howard Cylinder, I saw. Jean Gray, I saw. And I also see Ariane from the office. So really want to thank our STAR staff for joining us. This is, of course, learning for all of us, right? So we can, even though we know lots of stuff, we can learn more and more every time we hear about these wonderful vacations. Most importantly, I want to thank you all for joining us and for giving us your time, your very important time, to hear about what we have to offer, to learn more about what we do and these wonderful trips. And I look forward to welcoming you on these trips. And I'll stay around for a couple minutes if you have any questions, but if you want to go, thank you for coming, and I'll see you on Tuesday, June 6th. All right, everybody, I'm going to stop recording and then you can stay on after. Thank you so much.
Thank